The restaurant was unusually calm that evening, the kind of calm that only comes after a long, busy day. Soft music played from a small speaker above the counter, mixing with the faint sound of plates being stacked in the kitchen. Most of the customers had already finished their meals, and only a few tables remained occupied. The lights were warm and gentle, making the whole place feel like a cozy shelter from the noisy world outside. At one corner of the room, near a window, an old piano sat untouched. Its wooden frame carried small scratches that showed how long it had been around. People rarely played it anymore. Most evenings, it was only a decoration. Tonight, it would become something else, though no one knew it yet. A waitress moved from table to table with a tired but determined expression. She had been working since morning, yet she stayed patient with every customer. Her hair was tied back neatly, and her uniform had a few wrinkles from the long shift, but she still tried her best to maintain a gentle smile. She hummed softly while clearing dishes, not loud enough for anyone to recognize the tune, but enough for someone with a sharp ear to notice that someone happened to walk in just then. A man in a neat dark suit entered the restaurant. He wasn't loud or demanding, but his presence naturally drew attention. He carried himself with confidence, the kind that comes from someone who had experienced many successful years in business. He took a seat near the piano, perhaps without thinking much about it. The waitress approached him with her usual polite smile and handed him a menu. "Take your time," she said softly, stepping back to let him look through the options. But the man wasn't reading. He was looking at her instead, with a curious expression. He had noticed the way she hummed, the little spark in her voice, the rhythm that came naturally. "You sing," he said casually. She blinked, surprised. "Oh, I'm just humming." "It's a habit. Do you play the piano too?" he asked, glancing toward the old instrument beside his table. The question caught her off guard. She followed his gaze to the piano, and then quickly looked away. "Not really. I used to." "A long time ago," she replied, hoping he wouldn't ask more. But he smiled, a small, kind smile. "Why did you stop?" She shrugged lightly. "Life gets busy. Bills don't pay themselves." She tried to keep her voice steady and light, but there was a small sadness hidden inside her words. He nodded, as if he understood more than she expected. He looked at the piano again. "It still works?" She nodded. "Yes, but no one really plays it anymore." The man leaned back in his chair and rested his hand on the table thoughtfully. Then he said something that surprised not just her, but a few nearby customers who happened to hear. "Why don't you play something for us?" The waitress froze. "Me?" He nodded again. "Yes, just one song. I'd like to hear it." His voice wasn't pushy, but it carried an encouraging tone that made the request sound lighter than it felt. She shook her head immediately. "Oh no, I can't. I'm not good anymore. I haven't touched a piano in years." "All the more reason to try," he said gently. Then he added, "I'll give you a good tip if you play even a small melody." A few customers turned their heads, interest growing. The room wasn't busy, and the soft music from the speaker wasn't exciting enough to hold anyone's focus. This new suggestion sparked a quiet ripple of curiosity. The waitress felt her face warm with embarrassment. She shook her head again, laughing nervously. "I'm serious. I'm not good anymore." "I'm serious too," he replied with a calm but firm tone. "I'd really like to hear you play." She looked at him, trying to read whether he was joking or just being kind. But his eyes were steady, patient, and filled with genuine interest. "It's just one song. No pressure. And if you don't want to, that's okay too." Another group of customers whispered among themselves. Someone said quietly, "Let her try. It might be nice." Another nodded. The soft attention made her even more nervous. She glanced at the piano again. The memories came back, old lessons, childhood evenings, the excitement of learning something new, and later, the pain of giving it up when life became too heavy. She had not expected anyone to ask her about music again. "I'm not sure," she said softly. The man spoke again, but this time his voice carried warmth instead of expectation. "Sometimes old talents just sleep. They don't disappear. Maybe they're waiting for a moment like this." His words sat with her for a few long seconds. She took a slow breath and tried to calm her nerves. She wasn't sure if she was ready. She wasn't sure if she could still play even a simple tune. But something in his encouragement and the gentle, hopeful looks from a few customers made her feel like she should at least try. "Okay," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just one song. But please don't expect much." The man smiled, and the customers around the room quietly straightened in their seats. Even the workers in the kitchen leaned closer to listen. The waitress wiped her hands on her apron, trying to stop them from shaking. Every step toward the piano felt like a step into the past. It had been so long since she had sat in front of one, and she feared her fingers had forgotten everything. She reached the piano bench and paused. Her heart beat faster than she wanted to admit. She could feel every pair of eyes on her, waiting. For a moment, she thought about turning back. She could pretend she had changed her mind, return to her work, and forget this moment ever happened. But something stopped her, a small spark of courage, she thought. She had lost years ago. She slowly sat down on the bench. The piano keys were cold beneath her fingertips, but familiar in a way that made her chest tighten. She took a deep breath, cleared her mind, and gently pressed one key. A soft sound filled the corner of the room. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't strong. But it was a beginning. The restaurant grew completely silent. The man leaned forward slightly, his eyes focused on her hands. The customers watched with quiet excitement, wondering what she would play. The waitress closed her eyes for a moment, letting the memories guide her. She touched another key, then another. Slowly, a small melody started to form. Everyone in the room felt the shift, the feeling that something unexpected was about to happen. And as the first gentle notes floated through the restaurant, no one moved, no one spoke. They simply watched, waiting to see what would happen next. The entire room held its breath, and her story was just beginning. The first notes she played were shaky, almost like her fingers were unsure whether they still remembered the language of music. But the sound, even in its softness, carried something pure. It flowed into the quiet room and reached the ears of every person sitting there. No one expected anything grand, yet the moment she touched the keys, it felt like the whole restaurant shifted into a deeper kind of silence. She took in a slow breath, trying to settle her nerves. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept them on the keys. The man who had encouraged her sat very still, watching with calm interest. His expression wasn't impatient or demanding. It was gentle, reassuring. That made her feel a little safer, even though her heart was racing. She tried a simple scale, something she had practiced hundreds of times long ago. The notes came out uneven, but she didn't stop. She pressed another key, then another, letting her hands move at their own slow pace. Though the mistakes were noticeable, no one laughed, no one sighed. People were simply waiting, listening. For a moment, she felt unsure again. Her mind whispered, "You shouldn't have agreed. You're embarrassing yourself." The fear crept in, pulling her focus away. Her fingers froze above the keys. Then she heard a soft voice from somewhere in the room. "Take your time." It wasn't loud. It wasn't even clear who said it. But it was enough. She closed her eyes and let the memory of her old music teacher come back to her. She remembered sitting in a small room with dusty windows, learning to press each key with care. She remembered how happy she used to feel when she learned a new melody. That feeling had faded over the years, buried under work, responsibilities, and long days that allowed no time for dreaming. But now, sitting in front of this old piano with everyone watching, she felt that tiny spark again. She let her fingers move. Slowly at first, then a little faster. She found herself playing a tune she learned when she was a child, a soft, simple melody her teacher used to call a song that smiles. The notes fell into place with surprising ease, almost as if the music had been waiting inside her all this time. The room reacted before she even opened her eyes. A few people leaned forward in their seats. A couple sitting near the window exchanged amazed looks. Someone in the back whispered, "She can really play." She didn't hear everything clearly, but she felt their attention. For once, it didn't scare her. It lifted her. Her hands moved with more confidence now, finding a rhythm that made the tune feel alive. And for those few moments, she wasn't a tired waitress rushing between tables. She wasn't someone struggling to manage bills and responsibilities. She was someone who loved music, someone who once dreamed of playing on bigger stages. The melody flowed more smoothly, each note rising softly, like a small breath of hope. The people in the restaurant began to sense something special. Even the workers in the kitchen paused their chopping and grilling to listen. The man who had challenged her to play watched with a warm expression. His eyes softened, and a small smile formed on his face. He had expected a simple tune, maybe even just a few notes played shyly. But this was different. This was more than he imagined. The waitress continued to play, letting her heart guide the movement of her hands. She didn't think about mistakes anymore. She didn't think about the audience. She didn't even think about the man who had encouraged her. She simply let the music speak for her. And the music did speak. It filled the room with a calm beauty that made everyone fall silent. A little girl sitting with her parents near the door leaned her head onto her mother's shoulder, listening as if the melody were telling her a secret. An older man sitting alone closed his eyes, letting the sound remind him of something from long ago. The waitress wasn't aware of any of this. She was lost in the melody, letting years of hidden emotion flow through her fingertips. When she finished the tune, her fingers rested on the keys for a moment longer. She opened her eyes and looked around, expecting people to look away, maybe return to their meals, maybe offer a polite smile. But instead, the room was completely still. Then the applause began. It wasn't loud at first. It started with a few claps from one table, then another. Then someone near the back joined in. Soon the entire restaurant was clapping, some even cheering lightly. The waitress felt her face warm. She tried to hide her smile, but it grew anyway. She couldn't believe that people had enjoyed her playing. She thought she had lost her skill long ago. The man who had first asked her to play stood up and clapped as well. His applause was strong, proud, and full of genuine appreciation. She stepped away from the piano, unsure what to do next. She didn't want to take a bow like a performer, but she also didn't want to rush back to work as if nothing had happened. When she walked toward the man's table, she felt a mixture of embarrassment and happiness swirling in her chest. "I told you I wasn't that good," she said with a shy smile. He shook his head gently. "You're better than you think." His voice was steady and sincere. "You have something special. You shouldn't hide it." She didn't know how to respond. Compliments weren't something she received often. Most days, people only noticed if she missed a refill or forgot a detail in their order. "You really think so?" she asked quietly. "I know so," he replied. A few customers nearby nodded or smiled at her as they returned to their meals. Some even gave her small gestures of encouragement, thumbs up, warm smiles, appreciative nods. These little gestures touched her deeply. The man continued, "When you play, you don't just hit the keys. You tell a story. People can feel it." She looked down at her hands, seeing them in a new light. Maybe they weren't just tired hands that carried trays and wiped tables. Maybe they were still capable of creating something beautiful. "I haven't played in so long," she whispered. "I thought I lost it." He shook his head. "Some things never leave us. They wait, they rest, and when the right moment comes, they return." His words stayed with her, stirring something deep inside. She returned to her work with a lighter heart, though her hands were still trembling a little from the excitement. Every now and then, she glanced at the piano. It no longer looked like an old piece of furniture collecting dust. It looked like a part of her past calling back to her. The customers continued to speak softly about her performance. A couple asked if she would play again sometime. Another person told her she should consider practicing more. The encouragement made her cheeks warm, but in a good way. Later in the evening, when the crowd thinned out and the man finished his meal, he called her over one last time. "You did something brave today," he told her. "Most people would have said no, but you tried. And that says a lot about who you are." She didn't know what to say, so she simply nodded. "You have a gift," he added. "Don't let it fade again." Before leaving, he left a generous tip on the table. Not because of the meal, not because he felt obligated, but because he wanted to show his appreciation. She picked up the tip after he walked out, feeling overwhelmed by everything that had happened in just one evening. She looked once more at the piano. Something inside her whispered, "Maybe it's time to try again." That night, after the restaurant closed, she sat at the piano one more time. No audience, no pressure, no expectations. She touched the keys gently, letting her fingers find their way, and though the tune was simple, it carried a hope she hadn't felt in years. Her journey, though she didn't yet know it, was only beginning. The next morning, the restaurant felt different. The same chairs were in the same places, the same tables lined up neatly, and the same soft music played from the speakers. Yet something in the air felt lighter, almost as if the walls themselves remembered the melody that had filled the room the night before. The waitress walked through the door with a feeling she hadn't felt in a long time, something close to excitement, mixed with a little nervousness. She wasn't sure whether anyone would mention her piano playing. She wasn't even sure if she wanted them to. Part of her hoped it had all been a dream, something she had imagined. But the warmth in her chest told her it had been real. She tied her apron and began her shift, trying to focus on her tasks. But her eyes kept drifting to the old piano in the corner. It looked a little brighter in the morning light, as if the dust that had gathered over the years had somehow faded overnight. As the day went on, customers started to come in. A few regulars smiled at her in a way that felt different. Not pitying, not shallow, just kind. One older woman approached her when she came to take the order. "I heard you played last night," the woman said with a gentle smile. The waitress felt her cheeks warm. "Oh, I just tried a small tune. Nothing special." The woman shook her head. "People were talking about it. They said you played beautifully." Her heart fluttered at the compliment. She thanked the woman and walked back toward the counter, trying hard not to blush. Later, a couple who had been there the previous night came in for lunch. They waved at her with bright smiles. "We enjoyed your piano playing so much," the man said. "You should play again sometime." The woman beside him nodded. It made the whole place feel warm. The waitress thanked them but didn't promise anything. She didn't know if she was ready to play again, at least not in front of people. Last night had felt like a strange mix of courage and luck. She wasn't sure she could repeat it. As the day continued, she got busier, and the conversations faded into routine. She took orders, served meals, cleaned tables, and made sure everyone was comfortable. But inside, her thoughts kept returning to the piano, to the music, to the feeling she had when the melody flowed from her fingers. When evening approached, The restaurant lights dimmed a little, giving the place its usual warm glow. The dinner crowd was larger than the afternoon one. People chatted, laughed, and filled the room with soft energy. Then, someone walked in who made her heart jump slightly. It was the same man, the one who had challenged her to play the night before. He carried that same calm confidence, but tonight, his face held something else too, something like anticipation. He chose the same seat near the piano, almost as if it belonged to him now. When she approached to take his order, she tried to keep her voice steady. "Good evening," she said politely. "Would you like the same meal as yesterday?" He smiled. "Actually, I came for something else." She paused, unsure what he meant. He nodded slightly toward the piano. "People told me you played again after closing last night. Is that true?" The waitress blinked in surprise. "How did you know that?" He chuckled softly. Word travels fast when something beautiful happens. She didn't know how to respond. She hadn't expected anyone to notice her late-night playing. "I only played a little," she said quietly. "Just for myself." "No," he replied gently. "You played because you still care about music, even if you've been hiding it." His words touched something deep inside her, something she didn't want to admit out loud. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she asked, "Are you going to ask me to play again?" He didn't rush his answer. "Only if you want to. Last night, you played because you were brave. Tonight, if you choose to play, it should be because you feel it." She looked at the piano for a long moment. The keys looked almost inviting from where she stood, but the fear returned too. What if she made mistakes? What if people expected too much? What if the first time had been just luck? "I'm not sure," she admitted. "That's okay," he said kindly. "Take your time." She took his order and went back to work, but she couldn't focus the way she normally did. Every time she passed the piano, her eyes lingered. Every time she heard a customer laugh or talk softly, she wondered what it would feel like to fill that space with music again. As the dinner hour continued, the restaurant became busier. A family celebrated a birthday in one corner. A group of friends joked loudly near the center. A couple sat quietly by the window, sharing a dessert. Life moved around her in warm, gentle ways that made the place feel almost magical. And through it all, the piano waited. When she served the man his meal, he looked up at her with an expression that was understanding, not demanding. "You don't have to," he reminded her. "The choice is yours." She appreciated that. It made her feel safer. She nodded quietly and returned to her duties. But the more she tried to ignore the piano, the more her heart pulled toward it. Finally, after what felt like an hour of silent decision-making, she approached the man's table. "I might try something," she said softly. His face lit up with a gentle smile. "Only if you want to." She nodded. "I think I do." The restaurant wasn't silent like the night before, but as she walked toward the piano, something changed. Conversation softened. Forks paused mid-air. Even the kitchen staff peeked through the doorway, sensing something was about to happen. She sat at the piano, placing her hands on the keys as carefully as if they were delicate glass. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sounds of the room fade. All she could hear was her heartbeat and a distant memory of the songs she used to love. Then her fingers moved. This time, the melody didn't start shaky. It began softly, but with more confidence. A slow, emotional tune filled the restaurant, wrapping around conversations and drifting into every corner. People turned their heads. The birthday family quieted down, listening. The group of friends paused their laughter. The couple by the window held hands and listened too. She played with more feeling than she expected. The notes flowed smoothly, telling a story of someone who had once dreamed of music and had almost forgotten how much it meant. The longer she played, the more her fears melted away. She wasn't thinking about mistakes or expectations. She wasn't thinking about whether people were watching or judging. She was thinking about how much she missed this, how much she missed feeling like herself. Her eyes stayed closed, and her hands moved freely. Almost as if guided by memories, she didn't know she still carried Dot. The tune carried sadness and hope at the same time. It rose gently, dipped softly, and carried a warmth that made people in the room fall silent. Even the children in the restaurant watched in amazement. Dot, the man near the piano, leaned back slightly, listening with full attention. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to speak. He simply let the music unfold. The waitress played until the melody naturally came to an end. When the final note faded, she lifted her hands slowly from the keys. Silence followed. A deep, meaningful silence. Then applause erupted much louder than the night before. People clapped with genuine admiration. Some even stood. A few had tears in their eyes, touched by the emotion in her playing. She turned slightly, overwhelmed. Her eyes filled with tears she didn't expect. She covered her mouth, trying to steady her breath. The man clapped the loudest, his expression filled with pride and warmth. She stood up from the piano slowly, still unsure how to handle the attention, but feeling something inside her shift something bright. Dot, as she walked back toward her station, customers smiled at her, thanking her, telling her how beautiful the music was. She felt lighter than she had in years. The man waited until the applause faded before speaking. "You didn't just play," he said softly when she approached him. "You touched people." She looked at him, speechless for a moment. "Do you realize what you did?" he asked Dot. She shook her head. "You reminded people of what real emotion sounds like." "That's rare." Her eyes watered again, but this time from joy. That night, when the restaurant finally closed, she sat at piano once more. She didn't play a full song, just a few soft notes. But each note carried a promise she made silently to herself. She wasn't going to let music disappear from her life again, not after tonight. Her journey had truly begun stronger, clearer, and filled with new hope. The next day, the restaurant opened as usual, but the atmosphere had changed. The staff moved a little lighter, the customers smiled a little brighter, and the old piano in the corner seemed to beckon the waitress as she walked past. She had barely slept, thinking about what had happened the night before. Her hands had trembled slightly when she played, but now they itched with a quiet excitement. She wanted to touch the keys again, to feel that music flow through her once more. The day went on with the usual rhythm, taking orders, serving food, wiping tables. Yet the memory of the applause and the looks of admiration stayed with her. For the first time in years, she felt noticed for something that truly mattered to her. Not just for doing her job well, not just for being polite, but for sharing a part of herself. By evening, the man who had first encouraged her to play returned. This time, he seemed to be waiting. When she approached to take his order, he looked at her with a seriousness that was rare for him. "I wanted to speak with you," he said quietly. "About last night." She nodded, unsure what he meant. "About my playing?" He smiled, but it wasn't the casual smile of the first night. It was deeper, filled with meaning. "Yes, you have a gift. A talent that deserves to be shared beyond this restaurant. I'd like to help you." Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't know what to say. She had never had anyone offer her such an opportunity. Her life had always been about survival, working, paying bills, helping her family. Music had been a dream she tucked away long ago. "Help me?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," he said. "I want to support you. Professional lessons, recording your music, introducing you to people who can help you take this further. You shouldn't let your talent fade away." She blinked, overwhelmed. It felt unreal. She had only played a few notes for him, and he wanted to change her life? It seemed too good to be true. I don't know what to say, she murmured. Say yes, he said simply. That's enough. She looked around the restaurant. Some customers were still there, quietly observing the conversation, curious. Their soft smiles encouraged her. They weren't judging. They were happy for her. And in that moment, she realized this was her chance. A real chance. Okay, she said finally. I'll do it. His smile widened. Good. We'll start small, but step by step, you'll get there. You have the talent and the heart for it. That night, after the restaurant had closed, she sat at the piano again. The keys felt familiar beneath her fingers. She played slowly, savoring each note. But now, the melody carried a different feeling. It was not just about nostalgia or courage. It was about hope, about a new path opening before her. The following days were filled with small, steady changes. The man arranged for a professional instructor to meet her at the restaurant after hours. The lessons were intense, but enjoyable. She learned new techniques, improved her posture, and discovered ways to let her emotions guide her fingers. Evenings became a time of practice and growth. The restaurant staff and regular customers began to notice the change. Some would stay a little later, quietly listening as she played after hours. Her music no longer felt like a hidden treasure. It was beginning to shine out as she grew more confident. The man encouraged her to record a short piece. At first, she hesitated. The thought of someone listening to her music outside the restaurant was terrifying. But he assured her that people would hear her for the beauty of her talent, not for judgment. Finally, she agreed that the recording session was nerve-wracking. Her hands trembled, and her heart raced as she touched the keys. But when the melody began, she found herself lost in the music, just as she had the night she first played in front of him. The notes were pure and emotional, capturing the depth of her feelings. When it was done, she could hardly believe it had been her. The man listened carefully, nodding with approval. You've come a long way, he said. This is only the beginning. Over the next weeks, she continued to practice and improve. The restaurant became a second home for her music, a place where she could grow while still working to support herself. The customers began to notice her playing more often. Some even asked if she would perform small pieces for them during the dinner hours. She agreed cautiously, learning how to share her music without feeling pressured. Her confidence grew, not just in music, but in herself. She started to dream again, imagining what it might be like to perform on larger stages, to share her music with people who had never met her before. The idea no longer felt impossible. It felt achievable. One evening, as she finished a piece and rested her fingers on the keys, the man approached again. He handed her a small notebook. This is for your compositions, he said. Write down every idea, every melody, every emotion you feel. You have a story to tell through music. She took it with trembling hands, feeling the weight of its importance. For the first time in years, someone believed in her dreams. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Each day she played, learned, and grew stronger. People began to recognize her music, even outside the restaurant. Some regular customers would bring friends just to hear her play. Her melodies started to touch more hearts, and with each note, she felt closer to the person she always wanted to be. The man remained a steady presence, encouraging, guiding, and supporting her. He never pressured her. He never made her feel rushed. Instead, he offered opportunities when she was ready to take them. And with his help, she began to understand the true value of her talent. One evening, after a long day of practice, she looked around the restaurant. The old piano, once just a forgotten piece of furniture, now held her dreams. Her hands hovered above the keys, remembering how far she had come. The applause from the first night, the encouragement from the man, the smiles of the customers, they all had brought her here. She pressed a key softly, and a new melody began to flow. It was gentle, emotional, and full of life. She closed her eyes and let herself be carried by the music. This was more than just playing a piano. This was her story, her heart, her journey, and in that moment she knew that her life would never be the same. The challenge that had seemed small, a simple invitation to play, had become the doorway to a new beginning. Her talent, once hidden and forgotten, was finally awake, ready to take her places she had only dreamed of before. Months passed, and the waitress's life had transformed in ways she never imagined. The piano in the restaurant was no longer just an object in the corner. It had become a place where dreams began to take shape. Her days were still busy, filled with work and responsibilities, but the evenings belonged to her music. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more connected to the passion she thought she had lost forever. Her professional lessons continued regularly. Each session revealed something new: techniques she had forgotten, ways to express emotion through her hands, and ways to let her heart guide the melody. The man who had first encouraged her remained a steady presence, attending her practice sessions, offering advice, and introducing her to people in the music industry. Every small step forward felt like a victory. The restaurant staff had become her support system. They celebrated every improvement, every new song she learned. Some stayed after hours just to listen. Customers had started to request her music, and her little performances became a highlight of the evenings. The restaurant, once just a workplace, had become a nurturing space for her creativity. One evening, the man came to the restaurant with a small camera crew. She was surprised and nervous. "We're going to record a short video of your performance," he explained. "Not for publicity yet. Just to capture your journey and share your music with a few people who can help." Her heart pounded, but she nodded. She trusted him, and she had learned to trust herself too. She sat at the piano, closed her eyes, and let her fingers move naturally. The melody that flowed out was gentle, confident, and emotional. It told a story of struggle, hope, and rediscovery. The camera captured every detail, every emotion. When the video was shared with a small group of industry professionals, the response was overwhelming. People praised her talent, her authenticity, and the emotional depth of her playing. It was the first time she realized that her music could touch hearts beyond the restaurant walls. With the man's guidance, she began to explore opportunities to perform publicly. Small venues, local events, and community gatherings became her stages. Each performance boosted her confidence and refined her skills. She learned to manage nerves, to connect with audiences, and to let her music speak louder than her words. Her family noticed the change in her too. They saw the joy in her eyes, the energy she carried, and the pride she felt. They supported her fully, offering encouragement and help whenever they could. For the first time, she felt that her dreams were not only her own, they belonged to everyone who had believed in her along the way. As her reputation grew, she began to receive invitations to larger venues. She hesitated at first, remembering her shy, uncertain self from the first night at the restaurant. But the man reminded her of how far she had come. "You have talent," he said. "You have courage. Don't let fear hold you back." With each new opportunity, she learned more about herself. Performing in front of bigger audiences was nerve-wracking, but it also brought a sense of fulfillment she had never known. She discovered the power of music to connect people, to evoke emotions, and to inspire hope. One evening, she was invited to play at a community concert in a small theater. It was her first formal performance, and the theater was packed. As she stepped onto the stage, she felt a familiar tremor in her hands, but she also felt a new strength in her heart. She took her place at the piano, looked out at the audience, and smiled. The music began softly, building gradually into a melody that carried her story. The audience listened in silence, captivated by the emotion and sincerity in her playing. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others leaned forward, hanging on every note. By the time she finished, the theater erupted into applause. People were standing, cheering, and some even had tears in their eyes. She bowed, overwhelmed by the response. For the first time, she realized the true impact of her gift. Music had not only changed her life, but it had the power to touch others in ways she never imagined. After the performance, the man approached her with a proud smile. "You did it," he said simply. She laughed softly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I can't believe this is happening." "It's happening because you dared to play," he replied. "Because you trusted yourself." From that night on, her life continued to grow in ways that were both exciting and humbling. She balanced her work at the restaurant with her performances, lessons, and growing recognition. Every time she played, she remembered the moment when a simple challenge had changed everything. The moment a kind stranger believed in her enough to ask her to play dot, she began composing her own music as well. The small notebook the man had given her became filled with melodies, lyrics, and stories. Each composition was a piece of her journey, a reflection of her heart and experiences. Some she performed immediately. Others she kept private, treasures for the future. The restaurant continued to be a place of comfort and inspiration. Regular customers and staff alike cheered her on, proud to witness her growth. They remembered the shy waitress who had hesitated at the piano and now watched her blossom into a talented musician whose music reached far beyond their walls. The man remained a constant guide, helping her navigate opportunities, encouraging her to take risks, and reminding her to stay true to herself. He never demanded, never pressured. Instead, he celebrated each step she took, each note she played, and each milestone she achieved. Eventually, she was invited to larger stages and even local radio shows. Her performances inspired others, especially those who had given up on dreams they thought were impossible. People would come up to her after shows, telling her how her music had moved them, how it had brought them hope or comfort. Through it all, she never forgot the restaurant, the first night, or the man who had believed in her when she doubted herself. She returned often, sometimes just to play quietly for the staff and regular customers. The old piano in the corner had become a symbol of her journey, a reminder that courage, opportunity, and a little faith could change a life forever. Years later, she would look back on that first evening and realize it was the moment everything began. The challenge that seemed small, a casual invitation to play, had become the doorway to her dreams. She had rediscovered herself, found her voice, and learned that talent, when nurtured and shared, could transform not only her life, but the lives of everyone around her. She smiled as she touched the keys, the familiar feel bringing her peace and joy. The journey was ongoing, full of new challenges and opportunities, but she faced them with confidence, passion, and hope. The girl who once doubted her music had grown into a woman who believed in herself, her dreams, and the power of her own heart. And it all started with one simple moment of courage in a quiet restaurant when a stranger dared to ask her to play.